Report on News X World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro has arrived at the Brooklyn Detention Center in New York following his indictment in the Southern District. The United Kingdom and France have jointly struck a suspected ISIS weapon dump in Syria. Britain's defense ministry said the strikes were to help prevent resurgence of the Daesh terrorist movement. Thousands of Venezuelan and Mexican demonstrators gathered outside the U.S. and Venezuelan embassies in Mexico City, with opposing groups clashing verbally over the political situation in Venezuela following recent U.S. military action. House and Senate Democrats have demanded an immediate briefing on the strikes and arrest of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela. North Korea's latest missile test has drawn worry from Japan. South Korea, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command says it is monitoring the situation closely. The Constitutional Chamber of Venezuela Supreme Court ordered that Vice President Delcy Rodriguez assumed the role of acting president of the country in the absence of Maduro. Yemen's southern separatists welcome a call for dialogue by Saudi Arabia to end a recent military escalation, a potential sign that an unusually public confrontation between the kingdom and the UAE may be easing. US President Donald Trump says he was frustrated with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the continued war in Ukraine, repeating that he had initially believed ending the war would be easy. Alright viewers, let's start with our top focus that continues to remain on Venezuela. US lawmakers are deeply divided over the recent US military action there, which has led to the capture of Nicolás Maduro. Democratic lawmakers have strongly condemned the strikes, calling it an illegal violation of international law. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib described the operation as illegal and unprovoked, while others criticized President Trump for bypassing Congress and risking further conflict. Republicans, however, have defended the actions, arguing that the attack was necessary to combat drug trafficking and target a regime involved in narco-terrorism. Senator Tom Cotton hailed the operation. Vice President J.D. Vance emphasized that Maduro's crimes justify the U.S. intervention. Joining me now in this discussion is Andrew K.P. Leong, international affairs expert. He joins us from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Mr. Leong, for joining us in this discussion and making yourself available to us. What do you think? Of course, the U.S. is divided. The U.S. Senators are divided. Democrats and even some conservative Republicans are opposing what Trump has done. But do you think there could be an suo motu cognizance of his actions in the U.S. Supreme Court or other courts?
Well, I don't think that the Trump's action would be countenanced in any meaningful way within the United States, considering his overall control over all the levers of power, the Supreme Court, the U.S. administration, which has been completely cleansed of any opposition, and of course the Senate and the House of Representatives. But I think that this is a paradigm shift moment for the world order. We are now witnessing a revival of colonialism, a form of colonialism, if not piracy. I mean, considering the military boarding of vessels in the open sea. But as far as Venezuela is concerned, I mean, Trump wants to run the country. And he said only this morning, Hong Kong time, that he doesn't believe that the lady whose election he said was stolen has enough following in Venezuela. I mean, this is a contradiction in terms.
That's exactly what we were discussing yesterday, if you remember.
Yes. If she won an election, obviously she had a popular support. But I think that this sudden verge towards American running the whole country speaks to the desire of the Trump administration to control the resources and to benefit from it. And as long as it suits American interests, that's a form of colonialism. Now, okay, I mean, you can say that Maduro is a drug king and he's committed crimes. But that's the drugs, the crimes are a matter of Americans' domestic legislation. And obviously, of course, in international law, the international law forbids drug trafficking as well. But on the other hand, this is one side of the picture. The other side, of course, is an invasion, is a plotted overthrow, and also arrest and abduction of another country's president. And that's a very dangerous president in international relations, and then sends a very, very strong signal to perhaps Cuba. Don't forget that Cuba, also like Venezuela,
Yeah.
remains a thorn on the side of the United States for a long, long time. If this is allowed to happen, the next victim could be Cuba. And don't forget that about the Cuban crisis at the time of the former Cold War. At the time of the Cold War, which nearly led to a World War III, between the United States and Russia. So that's a very dangerous thing. So that's one thing. Okay, I mean, not a lot of people in the United States ally themselves with the form of governance in Venezuela.
Yeah.
He's termed a dictator. This may well be true. But on the other hand, it's just like people running their own families. If you
Yes.
don't like other people running their families, would you impose your way of running a family to others? I mean, that's a very dangerous precedent as well. Now, of course, this also harks back to the national security strategy released in Washington only a couple of, well, maybe 2 weeks ago. And you will look at the latest national security strategy.
Yeah.
The front of, on top of that is the Trump administration desire to revive and to magnify the mono doctrine. In other words, regarding the Southern Hemisphere and the
Yeah.
Northern Hemisphere as a single Western Hemisphere under the domination of the United States. So that is also a very dangerous kind of
Precedent.
signal to other countries in South America, for example. And this could easily spark off
What
an
about China? Do you think there's
anti-colonialism
a
movement.
message for China as well in these strikes?
Well, of course, people are condemning the action, left, right, and center. I mean, countries like from the Middle East, from Russia, and also China, and also other countries. But you can condemn the action until the cows come home. It's not going to make a single bit of difference to what the Trump administrations believe, that because America is such a powerful country militarily, well, he can do whatever he likes. And witness other theaters, in over in Iran and also other smaller countries. But that's also a very strong signal to other countries whose regimes do not necessarily align with those of the United States. And then this would spark off a movement amongst countries in the Global South to firstly focusing on how to defend themselves, their own sovereignty better, and secondly, perhaps allying others more in the kind of a movement against this new colonialism, harking back to maybe in the mid 50s and 60s. So I think that what we are seeing now is a total destruction of what are the remnants of the so-called rule-based order.
Yes.
Even the fake leaves have now been removed by Trump, and it's a stark new form of colonialism, a new form of the rules of the jungle. I don't think that many countries would be happy with that.
Certainly, certainly. Points taken. Thank you very much for this interaction. But do continue to stay on with me, Mr. Leong. We now move on, viewers. Let's also tell you that Chilean President Gabriel Boric has condemned the U.S. attack on Venezuela and capture of Maduro, warning about the precedent it could set. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has also condemned the attack. Sheinbaum said U.S.-Mexico relations are good and that her cabinet will assess Mexico's relationship with Venezuela if the U.S. takes over the country's administration. Let's in fact listen into what the two leaders have said.
Como Gobierno de Chile, manifestamos nuestra máxima preocupación y enérgica condena frente a las acciones militares que Estados Unidos ha estado desarrollando en Venezuela, ante el anuncio de que un Estado extranjero pretende ejercer un control directo sobre el territorio venezolano, administrar el país y eventualmente, como señaló su presidente, continuar operaciones militares hasta imponer una transición política. Esto sienta un precedente extremadamente...
Lo hemos manifestado, nosotros condenamos cualquier intervención y nos guiamos por lo que establece la Constitución. Esto es más allá incluso de la presidencia de Maduro. Tiene que ver con la política internacional, la ley internacional, las leyes internacionales, y tiene que ver con principios muy claros de la política exterior mexicana que nosotros defendemos. Y en ese marco es nuestra declaración de condena a esta intervención y vamos a seguir evaluando y a seguir pues manifestándonos en este sentido en los siguientes días.
All right, and I'll request Mr. Leong to join me back in the discussion here. Well, you heard those statements. Of course, certain nations are worried, as they should be. We're talking about Cuba, Colombia, Iran, but indeed a message must have been also sent to China. But should we expect it to do anything more than the condemnation that has come in?
Well, I don't think there is anything meaningful or substantial that other countries can do at present. As I said at the beginning, you can condemn their stark contravention of international laws and the U.S. Charter and a respect for other countries' sovereignty and so on and so forth until the cows come home. It's no, I don't think it's going to make any significant difference. Now, because Trump's strategy, as I said at the beginning, is the revival or a magnification of the Monroe Doctrine covering the Southern Hemisphere, as highlighted in the latest national security strategy. And of course, the Venezuela is only maybe the first chapter, and he's going to extend his influence. Maybe the next victim could be Cuba. And then what's left? I mean, there are countries which are not totally aligned with the United States, including Brazil. But Brazil is not anti-America, but on the other hand, is closely related to China, part of the BRICS, and also South Africa. But on the other hand, if Trump thinks that he's going to use his dominance, his hegemony, to cover all these countries into total submission, I think that he could be mistaken, because the simple fact remains that countries like Brazil, countries like South America, to a lesser extent, depend on China as the largest export market. I mean, what does Brazil export? Soybeans. And then, of course, it's a direct competitor with the United States. They can't sell soybeans to America. So I think this simple fact that the economic dependence of a number of large countries in South America.
But that's the thing, Mr. Leong. China has invested about $100 million in Venezuela, and that country is now under the U.S. hand. So should China be worried for all the investment that it has put on Venezuela?
Well, I think that, of course, if China wants to intervene, this is likely to lead to into some sort of a kinetic war. I mean, what can China do thousands of miles away from South America? Let's not forget that China already thought about this a long time ago. I'm referring to the new Chinese port in Peru called the Chaney Port, CHAN. CAY, Chancay Port, on the western side of Peru. It is the largest port, is capable of handling 18,000 20 feet equivalent unit the containers, much bigger than the Panama Canal. This is to forestall. Already thought about it. Of course, it didn't happen all of a sudden. Forestall the possibility that the Panama Canal could be controlled by the United States. So I think China thought about this long and hard, long time ago already, and putting things in place. But it's not being pushed into immediate kinetic action. But of course, China is well able to defend itself, unlike other countries, having found a very effective countermeasure against Trump's coercion in the form of the rare earths, not just not the supplies, because you can find rare earth supplies in Ukraine, in Africa and other countries, but the processing, particularly processing of critical minerals like gallium. This single critical rare earth actually China controls the processing as much as something like 95%. And then if it's a critical usage is embedded in the United States, even the cutting edge military hardware like the F-35 fighters. And if China shuts down the rare earth supply chain, a lot of the American business will be affected. It's much more effective than a kinetic war. Nowadays, warfares are not just fought on the battlefield. Rivalry is not just fought on the battlefield. It's on supply chains, in economic dependence. As I said, I mean, this dependence dynamics also translate into the ability of countries in Latin America, like Brazil. In Brazil, as I said, I mean, sells the major products, agricultural products, soybeans. And then if the United States think they're getting Brazil to heal, obviously a lot of the people in Brazil would be affected, and that would translate into an anti-colonial movement again. So I think that this was now seeing a paradigm shift in the international relations. As I said, all the condemning in the world is not going to make a single difference, because the United Nations, in spite of its good work, in spite of the original purpose, has now lost its influence. And the Security Council is already been hijacked by the single veto of this legacy of the Second World War of the 5 permanent members. So again, this flags up on the need to reform the international order, to reform the United Nations. But that's a long-term project. Meanwhile, I think that it's very dangerous for countries to jump into an immediate reaction. Mindful of all these complicated dynamics which I've outlined.
No, thank you very much for all those points. Very insightful, and it's a great discussion with you, Mr. Leong. And with that, viewers, we're now going to proceed. Let's also now tell you that the United Nations Security Council will meet on the 5th of January following the US attack and the removal of Maduro. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the move a dangerous precedent, warning of serious implications for international law. The meeting was requested by Colombia with support from Russia and China. Venezuela's UN ambassador has accused the US of a colonial war aimed at plundering the country's resources, particularly its vast oil reserves. US President Donald Trump has said the US will oversee Venezuela until a safe, proper and judicious transition can be made, but the specifics of that plan remain unclear. Meanwhile, US Ambassador Mike Waltz defended the action, calling it justice for Maduro's role in narco-terrorism. And I welcome Dr. Asta Chadha in this discussion. All right, before I'm joined by Dr. Chadha, we continue to have Mr. Leong with us in the discussion here. Mr. Leong, you've already just spoken about how the UN Security Council has primarily been hijacked after World War II and, you know, with the single veto of the 5 permanent members. Now they are going to meet again tomorrow on January 5. Do you expect anything positive to come out of this meeting of the UN, or when was the last time that Trump has actually heard the United Nations?
Well, there will be a lot of talk, and of course it is better to talk about it openly in the United Nations than not doing so. At least the travesty of truth, for example, with Trump saying that this lady who lost her election hasn't got following in Venezuela, to justify his desire to run the country until the situation within quotation marks return to normal. But I think that this is productive to talk about it, but I don't think it's going to change anything, as I said, because at the end of the day, if there is a motion in the Security Council, the United States would exercise its veto. that would derail any kind of meaningful action. But as I said, it's useful to thrash out all these contradictions so the whole world could see the United States unilateralism for what it is.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Leong, once again for joining me in this discussion. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And moving ahead, viewers, Donald Trump has also expressed that Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, can run Venezuela, and said that she does not have the support or respect of the people. Trump has also said that he was putting Venezuela under temporary American control after the US captured Nicolás Maduro in an audacious raid and whisked him to New York to face drug trafficking charges. Let's first hear that statement from Trump, and then we have a discussion.
Of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President,
do you have any hesitations about Machado?
Mr. President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be the leader.
Is it possible?
All right, Dr. Asta Chadda, who's Associate Professor of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, joins us for this discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadda, for joining us. We've all been watching the developments closely since yesterday. We had a discussion when the news had just broken out and the strikes were just launched, and everything that has happened after that has truly, I would say, shocked the world. Now, you know, we were having this discussion yesterday when some were saying that Machado could take over. But at that time, we had pointed out how Machado's spokesman had said and called out the US for the strikes at a time when it had not even claimed the strikes, when the statement from Trump had not even come out. That's exactly what has happened. Now, Trump is saying she doesn't have respect enough to rule the country. Of course, it's him who wants to govern Venezuela. He's probably going to have Marco Rubio or somebody else control the administration. Supreme Court of Venezuela has, of course, appointed the vice president as the acting president. But then what really is Trump's plan? Everything that has happened up until now has been very precise, planned to the T. What do you think is the US going to do as far as the administration of the country is concerned? Because last we saw and we, believe that Machado was flown out of the country right after her Nobel Prize reception was there, and she went to Norway, and then she issued a statement to say that US helped her with escaping the country. But now Trump does not want even her to, act as the administrator. Who then? And what's the plan of action for Trump? No one knows for sure, but what's your guess?
Absolutely. I mean, see, had US not made the statement, or had President Trump not made the statement that they actually intend to temporarily run Venezuela, there might still have been hope that some grassroots leader or someone in opposition to Maduro's administration could be installed in power, even if it is, temporary or interim government kind of a setup. But given the fact that they've completely ruled out Machado being a leader in transition, leaves Venezuela in a very, very vulnerable position. And then again, one needs to go back to see why President Trump made that statement in the first place. He's made that statement because, together with, commenting on how they were successful in this operation and they took Maduro and his wife out of the country, flew them back to the States to face criminal charges for narco-terrorism, they also mentioned that now they're going to get the oil flowing.
Yeah.
And unless and until there is a leader who, in President Trump and his administration's eyes, can run appropriately Venezuela so as to ensure that whatever were the US objectives with regard to this military operation can be run exactly how they want, they probably would not be able to, succeed the Maduro administration, even if it is temporarily. So, there are some other candidates, for instance, there was, at some point, actually, Machado herself was backing Edmund Gonzalez Urrutia, who had won the 2024 elections. But is that also a person that the Trump administration sees as a possible political engine of this new anti-Maduro movement that they would want to stir? That is very much in a question mark at the moment.
Yeah, so when it says that it's going to temporarily govern when Trump says that he's going to temporarily take over Venezuela, how is he going to do that? What are some of the mechanisms that we can expect his government to install in Venezuela? How will he rule a country away from being there?
Well, that again rests on the three major objectives that have now become very, very clear with regard to this US military operation in Venezuela. One is they wanted to target narco-terrorism. So whoever is put in place, I mean, again, I'm using my words very carefully here because we don't know who they intend to actually put in Maduro's place. But whoever is put in his place should be somebody who understands that, at least on the face of it, the entire operation should look like an anti-drug trafficking and anti-conspiracy sort of an operation, and should not come across as a regime change operation. The second aspect here is, this person who's put in place should look like they're facilitating a transition to democracy. Because that is the second aim that US had, which was, to dismantle Maduro administration, because he was pretty much a hindrance to whatever US wanted to achieve there. So the person in power should consider the Maduro administration illegitimate, should have had a voice as such, declaring that even before the US operations, and then should facilitate this democratic transition, so to say. And the third thing is, again, I want to return to it, is President Trump explicitly mentioning they want to get the oil flowing. So this has to be some person who would enable, if not facilitate, at least let US secure Venezuela's vast energy reserves during this transition period. And again, another big question, we don't know how long this transition period or how long this caretaking period would extend. When does US actually intend to reinstate or allow a certain democratic transition to actually take place? That again remains in a big question mark. And why? Because again, if we go back to these statements, because we don't have much on our hands as of now, apart from the statements that we keep hearing from the US government here and there. And we are hearing that similar operations or similar possibilities still there, that similar operation could be planned in Cuba, for instance. And hence you see a lot of these, negative responses to US military operation are coming out of these countries who are clearly very, very careful. They are very, very much in question mark, and they are also very, in some ways, fearful of their sovereignty. Clearly, the Venezuelan sovereignty has been, transgressed in this case, and countries like Cuba, who in general depend for over 70% of their energy needs on Venezuela, are now in a bad spot. So we'll just have to wait and watch and see exactly not only who is put in place, but how long they are put in place.
Sure, we'll of course watch out for that. But thanks very much, Dr. Chadha, for speaking to us. And moving ahead, we have some breaking news now coming in. Starlink is now providing free broadband service to the people of Venezuela through February 3, ensuring connectivity is continued. Starlink founder billionaire Elon Musk posted on X saying that the move was in support of the people of Venezuela. Right, moving ahead now, Swiss authorities have placed the managers of Le Constellation Bar under criminal investigation. The French couple, Jacques and Jessica Moretti, are suspected of manslaughter by negligence, bodily harm by negligence, and arson by negligence. The tragic fire killed at least 40 people and injured another 119. 8 Swiss nationals among the victims were the first to be identified early on January 3. Authorities say the fire likely started when sparklers on bottles came too close to the ceiling. Investigators are looking into whether the venue's acoustic foam contributed to the fire and if it complied with regular safety regulations. And let's also track some news from South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung has departed for a state visit to China, where he will hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The visit comes as Seoul looks to Beijing to play a role in promoting peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. South Korea's presidential office says Lee is expected to raise the issue of North Korea, urging China to help facilitate dialogue with Pyongyang. The outreach comes despite North Korea having dismissed engagement efforts from Lee since he took office 7 months ago. This will be Lee's second meeting with Xi Jinping in just 2 months, underscoring growing diplomatic engagement between Seoul and Beijing. Talks between the two leaders are scheduled to take place on Monday. That's all we have time for. Thanks for staying tuned to NewsX World for all international news and updates.